The silent prey, early morning sun spilled gently across the Hollywood hills, casting a soft glow on the set of a high-budget action film. It was supposed to be just another shoot. Daylights, cameras, noise, but something in the air felt different, like a whisper of tension beneath the glitz. Keanu Reeves, quiet as always, walked alone through the lot, his black backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside it, next to his worn script, was something few knew he carried on every shoot: a small leather prayer book. Old and creased, gifted by his mother when he was 15. He didn't make a show of it, he never did. While others cracked jokes, or scrolled through their phones between takes, Keanu found a corner, closed his eyes, and whispered to something bigger than himself. It wasn't a grand act. It was soft, humble, private, but that day, someone noticed. A new assistant director, young, eager, and loud, watched from a distance, then laughed a little too loudly. "What's he doing? Praying?" said, turning to a group of crew members. Nearby, they chuckled awkwardly, unsure if they should laugh. Most of them respected Keanu. They knew he wasn't like the others. He didn't demand attention, didn't ask for special treatment. He helped carry gear when no one asked. He learned the names of every crew member. But to the new guy, all of that looked weak. Keanu heard the laugh. He didn't turn. He didn't flinch. He simply placed the prayer book back into his bag, stood up, and walked quietly to set. The air around him shifted. It wasn't anger, wasn't shame. It was something heavier, quieter, like grief wrapped in grace. The first scene was an intense one. Keanu's character had to deliver a heartfelt monologue while holding a dying friend in his arms. The cameras rolled. Everyone held their breath. And Keanu delivered. His voice didn't shout. It didn't break. It trembled, draw deep and honest. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't force them. They came naturally, as if pulled from something real inside him. The crew forgot it was acting. For those few minutes, the whole set stood still. Even the new assistant director couldn't look away. Cut silence, then applause, soft at first, then building. The director wiped a tear from his eye and nodded. That was it. Perfect. Keanu gave a small smile, nodded respectfully, and walked off set. In the corner, the young assistant tried to act like nothing had happened. But the shift had already started. People whispered less and watched more. They noticed how Keanu spoke, kindly to everyone, even the ones who mocked him. They noticed how he stayed late to help reset equipment. They noticed how he never responded with pride, only quiet consistency. But the moment that changed everything came during lunch break. Keanu sat at a table alone, eating quietly. When the assistant approached, him half joking, half curious. "You still do that prayer thing every day?" he asked with a smirk. Keanu looked up, calm. "Yeah," he said softly. "It reminds me that everything I do, every line I speak, every person I meet, it all matters. Not because I'm better, but because I'm lucky to be here." The assistant blinked. "But you're famous. Rich. What do you need faith for?" Keanu smiled, almost sadly. "For the things money can't fix, for the pain that doesn't show up in interviews, for the people I've lost, for the silence that comes after the noise." Table fell quiet. Other crew nearby stopped pretending not to listen. The assistant nodded slowly. No joke on his lips this time. "I didn't know." Keanu reached into his bag and pulled out the prayer book. He didn't hand it over, just held it in both hands. "You don't have to understand it," he said. "Just don't laugh at what keeps someone standing." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but that moment echoed through the rest of the production, and it was only the beginning. Whispers behind the lens of days that followed felt different. Not because of anything Keanu said, but because of what he didn't. He never brought up the prayer moment again, never mentioned the assistant. He didn't hold a grudge, didn't change the way he treated anyone. If anything, he became even more gentle. He kept showing up early, kept thanking the crew, one by one. He kept sitting in that same quiet corner during breaks, whispering to the sky. Or maybe to someone he missed. People began noticing things they hadn't before. How he carried extra water bottles in his backpack and gave them to the lighting crew. On hot days, how he memorized everyone's name, even the interns. How he stayed behind after late shoots to help clean up the mess no actor ever touched. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was curiosity. The same assistant who mocked him had stopped laughing. He started watching. At first, it was subtle glances. Here and there, like trying to solve a puzzle. But one night, after a long shoot ended past midnight, the assistant saw something he never expected. Keanu was crouched beside one of the set carpenters, an older man named Thomas. Thomas had dropped a box of nails, and his back was too stiff to bend easily. Keanu didn't hesitate. He got down on his knees, helped gather every piece, then sat with Thomas, asking how his daughter's surgery went. Thomas, surprised by the question, blinked and smiled weakly. "She's recovering," he said. "Thanks for asking." "I've been praying for her," Keanu replied. He meant it not as a phrase, but as a promise. The assistant stood in the shadows, watching this man, this movie star, kneel in the dirt for someone whom most people walked past without a glance. Something shifted inside him, not all at once, just a small crack in a wall he didn't know he'd built. The next morning, the assistant walked into the green room holding 2 coffees. He hesitated, then offered one to Keanu. "Figured you might want one," he said. Keanu smiled, eyes kind. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful. You, still doing the prayer thing?" Keanu nodded gently. "Every day." There was no awkwardness, only honesty. "Can I ask?" The assistant paused. "What do you pray for?" Keanu took a breath, looking out the window at the early morning fog. "Peace, not just for me. For people carrying things they don't. Talk about for people who feel unseen. For the angry ones. For the scared ones. For people like you." The assistant froze. "Me?" "Yes," Keanu said without hesitation. "You carry something. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it." Assistant looked down. His voice cracked. "My brother died last year. No one talks about it. I just keep going." Keanu nodded slowly. "Shh, you don't have to pretend with me." Silence filled the room. Not heavy, not painful, just honest, and that honesty started to ripple across the set. One by one, people began opening up, not just to Keanu, but to each other. Someone brought their mother's rosary to work. Another crew member started meditating during lunch. A stuntman quietly asked Keanu if he'd ever doubted his faith. Keanu smiled and said, "All the time." But faith isn't about never questioning. It's about choosing to believe anyway. The movie being made was about war and revenge, but behind the scenes, something softer was being built thread by thread. Kind of quiet humanity. A reminder that beneath the costumes and special effects, everyone was just human. The director noticed the change too. Scenes ran smoother, egos lowered, even the usual gossip died down. There was more laughter, more kindness, more pause before speaking. And still, Keanu remained the same. Steady, present, gentle. Until the night everything almost fell apart. A major explosion scene was set to film. It was dangerous, real flames, timed charges, fast-moving stunts. Everyone was on edge. Then something went wrong. A detonation misfired. Smoke filled the set. People shouted. One of the stuntmen got knocked unconscious. Panic surged, and through the chaos, Keanu ran straight toward the fire, not away toward. He pulled the stuntman from the wreckage just before a second blast lit the area. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate. After the medics took over, someone shouted, "Why the hell? Did you run in there?" Keanu, covered in soot, looked down and said quietly, "Because I couldn't not." Everyone fell silent again, because what do you say to someone like that? What do you say to the man who prays in corners and carries wounded strangers without thinking? You stop mocking, you stop whispering, you start listening. And for the first time, the room wasn't laughing at Keanu's faith. They were wondering if maybe, just maybe, they'd been missing something all along. The letter in the Trail Earth explosion incident changed everything, not just for the production, not just for safety rules, but for people. People started acting softer, more present, more grateful. There was something strange and beautiful about it. The stuntman who got injured came back a few days later with a stitched-up arm and tears in his eyes. He didn't say much, just walked over to Keanu during lunch and hugged him. Keanu didn't make it a big deal. He just said, "I'm glad you're okay," and went back to eating. But not everyone was ready to accept it. A veteran actor on the set, Famous, was proud, sharp-tongued, didn't like the change. He saw it as weakness. In his mind, film sets were battlefields, not group therapy. And Keanu, with his quiet faith and gentle strength, was changing the rules. He started making comments, subtle at first. "Some of us don't need fairy tales to get through the day, or you praying again. What are you asking for? A better script?" People laughed less and less, but he didn't stop. He'd been in the industry for decades. He didn't believe in softness. He believed in control, in power, in keeping your guard up. In Keanu. Keanu never fired back, never insulted, never raised his voice, but every time the older actor mocked him, Keanu responded the same way with quiet eyes and a calm nod, like someone seeing past the noise. Then, one evening after a long shoot, the assistant director, the same one who once mocked Keanu, himself found a letter. It was taped to Keanu's trailer door. No name, just a folded piece of paper with small handwriting. He looked around. No one nearby. He opened it. "I don't believe in what you believe. I never have. I don't pray. I don't hope. I just get through the day. But for some reason, every time you speak, I feel something. Not because you're famous. Not because. You're nice. Because you make people feel seen. Because you don't treat anyone like they're beneath you. I mocked you because I was angry. Not at you. At myself. You made me remember a version of me I buried a long time ago. I don't expect. You too forgive me, but I wanted to say it. Thank you for not giving up on your kindness. Someone needed it more than you knew." The assistant read it twice, then walked straight into the trailer, handed it to Keanu and said, This is why I stopped mocking you." Keanu read the note in silence. He didn't ask who it was from. He didn't try to guess. He just smiled, folded the letter again with care, and placed it in his prayer book. "We never know who's watching," he said, "but someone always is." That night, something rare happened. Keanu spoke in front of the whole crew. The director had gathered everyone to thank them for a difficult week. Before wrapping, he turned to Keanu and said, "Anything you want to say?" Keanu looked at the group, guards, camera operators, actors, extras, assistants, some smiling, some still hurting, some looking down, and he said, "I've worked on hundreds of sets, and every one of them had something special. But this one feels like home. Not because of the lights or the story, but because I see people choosing to care. That's not normal. It's not Hollywood. That's rare. And I just want to say, thank you for letting me be myself. Even when it made no sense to some of you." The room was still. People clapped. Yes, but more than that, people stood, a little taller that night. They hugged longer. They spoke gentler, and the old actor who used to mock him, he watched from the back of the crowd, arms crossed, face unreadable. But that night, as most left the set, he stayed behind. He waited until Keanu was alone, packing up his bag, and then slowly he walked over. "You meant that? About feeling like home?" Keanu turned, calm as ever. "I did. Even with people like me around, especially with people like you around." The older man blinked. His voice cracked. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago. Haven't prayed since. Haven't believed since. When I see you, it makes me angry. Not because of what you are. It's because of what I lost." Keanu didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer answers. He just placed a hand gently on the man's shoulder. "Grief isn't weakness," he said. "It's the proof that we loved something real. It doesn't go away. But neither does the love underneath it." The man looked away, wiping his eyes. "How do you stay so calm?" Keanu looked up at the sky. "I talk to the people I miss, and then I do something kind in their name. And just like that, the man who mocked him turned, nodded, and walked into the night less angry. Not healed, not fixed, but no longer alone in his grief. And once again, Keanu said nothing more. He just folded the prayer book, zipped up his bag, and walked into the dark with quiet strength, and the whole set felt lighter, as if one man's simple faith had reminded them all that kindness still matters. When silence became a shield, sun was barely rising over the city skyline when Keanu arrived on set the next day. As usual, he didn't say much. He gave a small wave to the security guard, offered the lighting crew some warm tea he'd brought in a flask, and helped roll out a crate of equipment. Even though he didn't have to, he never acted like a star, and that was the strangest part for many. Not his fame, not his faith, but how none of it changed the way he moved through the world. That morning, people felt different around him, not distant, but cautious. Something had shifted since the old actor's confession the night before. More people wanted to talk to Keanu, but now, they didn't come with jokes or small talk. They came with real stories. A young makeup artist approached him while setting up her station. Her hands shook a little. "My brother has anxiety," she said softly, "scared of going outside most days. I told him about you, about how calm you are. He wanted to know how you do it." Keanu gave her a quiet smile. "Tell him I'm scared too. I just learned how to breathe through it." She paused. "You still get scared?" "Every day," he said. She teared up and hugged him without asking, and he let her. Later that afternoon, sound technician, a tall man with tattoos and a loud laugh, handed Keanu a small bracelet. "My daughter made this," he said. "She heard I work with John Wick. She asked if you'd wear it, said it keeps away bad dreams." Keanu held it like treasure. "Tell her I will," he said. "And tell her thank you. I've had a lot of those lately." Even during intense scenes, he remained steady. There was a scene where his character had to scream in rage, punch a wall, and storm off. The director wanted real anger, but when the cameras rolled, Keanu didn't scream. He whispered. His eyes burned with sadness, not fury. He punched the wall. Yes, but it wasn't wild. It was heavy, slow. Like every movement carried weight too painful to name. When the scene ended, no one spoke. Even the director, who usually demanded rewrites, just said, "Keep that, that's real." What people began to understand was that Keanu wasn't acting, he wasn't pretending, he was channeling something deeper, something that came from loss, from silence, from prayer. And then something unexpected happened. The studio announced a surprise visit from executives. They were worried about budget. Delays and rumors of too much emotional drama on set. Word spread quickly. Some people panicked, others grew quiet. But Keanu stayed exactly the same. He didn't complain, he didn't argue, he just kept doing what he always did, respecting people, showing up early, being kind. When the executives arrived, dressed in suits and fake smiles, the energy changed. They walked around with clipboards and whispered behind sunglasses. They watched scenes, scribbled notes, and pulled the director aside. That afternoon, they asked to speak to Keanu privately. No one knew what they said, but when Keanu came back out, his face looked tired. Not angry, not upset, just tired. The assistant director approached him. "Are they shutting us down?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, but they don't like what we're doing." "Why?" They said it's too quiet, too human, not enough action. The assistant director scoffed. "But this is the best work we've ever done." "I know," Keanu said. He didn't argue, he didn't fight, but he did something else. That evening, for everyone left, he stayed behind with the director and a small group of crew. He looked at them, voice steady. "If they take the story away from us, we tell it another way, not with cameras, not with big scenes, but with how we treat each other, with what we leave behind in every person we meet." The room was silent. And then the director, who had once been known for his temper, placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder and said, "They can cut the film, but they can't cut the truth." So they went on. the filming continued. But something had changed. Every scene now felt like a quiet rebellion. Every act of kindness was a protest. And at the center of it all was Keanu, the man who prayed in silence, the man who said less but meant more, the man who turned mocking into respect without lifting his voice once. The storm and the stillness wind howled outside the studio that morning. A rare storm had swept through the city, trees bent low, trailers shook, and production trucks groaned under the weight of cold rain. The shoot had been delayed for hours, and people grew restless. Tempers flared, though the warmth that had slowly built between the crew began to fade under wet shoes. Tight schedules and looming pressure from the studio. Keanu arrived late that day. It was the first time he had. He stepped out of a small black car, hair damp, clothes clinging slightly from the rain, but in his hands was something unexpected, a tray of warm pastries and a large thermos of hot cocoa. He walked through the chaos, offering them to anyone who would accept. Garf's camera crew, a simple smile on his face. Not forced, not performative, just present. People softened again. They remembered the day wasn't ruined. It was just wet. But not everyone was convinced. In the main production tent, the studio executive had returned, this time with a newer script, rewritten, louder, faster, colder. They wanted less reflection, more action, less dialogue, more explosions. They said viewers wanted thrill, not thought. Faith, grief, and stillness were too quiet for global markets. When the director read the new script, his face fell. Lines of meaning had been stripped away, entire scenes of emotional truth gone. He didn't speak. He just walked out into the storm and stood there, letting the rain fall down his face like he was too tired to wipe it away. Keanu found him moments later. He didn't speak either, just stood beside him in the rain. After a long silence, the director whispered, "They don't get it." "They don't have to," Keanu said. "Only we do." That night, the cast and crew gathered in the old rehearsal hall, not to film, but to talk. The room was lit by backup power and a few scattered lanterns, and in the middle of that flickering glow, Keanu stood and finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't use big words, but every sentence cut deep. We live in a world that moves too fast. It rushes past pain. It skips over silence, celebrates noise. But the truth doesn't shout. It whispers, it waits. And if we don't slow down, we miss it. The room was silent. No phones buzzed. No one looked away. You mocked me for what I believe," he continued. "Some of you still don't understand it, and that's okay. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to remind you that faith is not always about religion. It's about trust. Each other, in kindness, in second chances." His eyes scanned the room. "You don't need to believe what I believe. But you should believe in something. In love. In family. In yourself. Because the world will try to take it from you. If you don't hold on tight, it will disappear." He reached into his coat and held up his old prayer book, the one worn from years of use. "This isn't magic," he said. "It's memory. It's the voice of my mother. It's the hope of my sister. It's every tear I never got to cry. And when things get dark, I hold it. Not because it solves anything, because it reminds me who I am." A sound technician wiped his eyes. The assistant director looked down, gripping his water bottle. The older actor who had once mocked Keanu stood at the back, arms crossed, but no longer with bitterness in his eyes. He was listening and maybe healing. Keanu stepped back, voice quiet now. "If they change the movie, let them, but don't let them change you." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the makeup artist who'd once asked about her brother stood up and clapped once. Others followed, not loud, not forced, just honest, real, after that night. The storm passed, not just the one outside, but the one inside. The hearts of everyone on set, they knew the fight wasn't over. The studio still held the power, but now, so did they. They kept filming, and while some scenes were cut, Others were filmed in secret, quiet moments between takes, recorded by a small camera Keanu had bought himself, not for release, not for fame, but for truth. He called them the still frames, pieces of soul. And when the movie was finished, those small, unseen scenes filled with kindness, faith, and pain were added back in during post-production, not in defiance, but in hope. And no one at the studio noticed, because the truth had always been quiet. One final whispered sun was setting behind the hills as people gathered inside the old chapel just beyond the city. It wasn't a premiere. It wasn't an award show. There were no cameras, no red carpets. Only wooden benches, warm candlelight, and quiet music playing from a small speaker in the corner. Keanu had invited them all here. The cast of the crew, the people who had walked with him through the storm of filming. They didn't know why, but they came. Because something about this man, about his quiet way of moving through chaos, had changed them. He stood at the front, dressed simply, holding nothing this time. No script, no prayer book, just truth in his eyes. After a moment, he began, "I don't need applause," he said. "I've heard it enough to know it doesn't last." What lasts? Its presence. The room held still. When we started this journey, it was just a film. But it became something else. Not because of cameras or special effects, but because of how we chose to treat each other, because of what we shared in the silence between takes, because of the pain we brought with us, and the healing we allowed to happen. He paused. "You mocked me for my faith," he said gently, not to accuse, but to remind, and I understand. I used to mock it too, when I lost people, when I didn't have answers, when all I wanted was for the world to make sense. He looked around the chapel. But faith isn't always about having answers. Sometimes it's just staying kind, even when everything in you wants to close off. A tear slid down the cheek of the older actor. Sitting quietly near the back, Keanu continued. This film was supposed to be about revenge, about violence, about noise, but what it became was a lesson in stillness. He smiled. The studio didn't want the quiet parts, but we kept them, not because they were popular, but because they were real. He stepped down from the front, walked among them now. I don't need you to believe what I believe, but I do hope you leave here believing in something. Maybe it's each other. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's the simple idea that gentleness is still strength. He stopped beside the assistant director. It's the same man who once laughed at his prayer. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You changed," said quietly. The assistant nodded, eyes full. "Because you didn't." Keanu turned back to the small group. "This is my last project for a while," he said softly. "I need time. Not because I'm tired of acting, but because I want to live more scenes that don't need cameras." Someone laughed gently through their tears, and then Keanu said something no one expected. "Before we end this night, I'd like to say a prayer. Not a religious one, just a human one." No one moved, not out of fear, but out of respect. He closed his eyes and whispered, "For the ones who are hurting, may they find quiet places. For the ones who are angry, may they be met with patience. For the ones who feel lost, may they hear one kind word that reminds them who they are. And for the ones who laugh at things they don't understand, may they be forgiven. Because we all carry something we hide, and we all need someone who stays anyway." He opened his eyes, and there were no dry ones in the room. People stood in silence, not clapping, not filming, just standing together. After that night, Keanu left quietly. No announcement, no interviews, just a note left on the chapel bench. "I will keep whispering, because the world already has enough people shouting, and maybe, just maybe, someone will hear me." And the ones who did never forgot. The movie later became a quiet classic. Not a blockbuster, but story people watched when they needed hope, when they needed to feel again. And at the very end of the credits, just one simple line appeared. "Kindness is faith in action."